Sometimes it feels like those big medical breakthroughs we're hoping for, they just take forever,
Mm.
especially for really tough stuff like neurological disorders or chronic pain.
Yeah,
But what's fascinating is that, well, beneath the surface, there's actually a ton of cutting-edge work happening.
absolutely.
And in this area, treating these conditions, some of it involves, like, literally tapping into our body's own electrical system.
That's a perfect way to put it. And today, we're doing a deep dive into, well, a really dynamic part of that innovation,
Yeah.
the global market for neurostimulation
Oh,
devices.
okay.
We've been digging into a recent market report. It's just packed with data, and it really gives you a feel for where this field is heading.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Neurostimulation devices. For people hearing this maybe for the first time, what are we basically talking about? Keep it simple.
Sure. Think of them as medical tools. They
Mhm.
send controlled electrical pulses to very specific spots in your nervous system.
Hmm.
Could be the brain, spinal cord, even peripheral nerves.
Yeah.
It's a way to kind of adjust how those nerves are firing.
Right, tweaking the signals.
Exactly. And that can be super helpful for managing all sorts of things from really stubborn chronic pain to conditions like Parkinson's. And often it's, less invasive than major surgery or being on meds long term.
Makes sense.
We're mostly looking at things like spinal cord stimulators. They're big for pain. Then deep brain stimulators, often for movement disorders. And also vagus nerve stimulators, used for things like epilepsy. They each have their own niche, really.
So, fine-tuning the body's electrics to help it work better sounds, well, incredibly promising for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, what's the big picture here for this report? What's our mission, for the listener?
Yeah, good question. Our main goal today is really to sift through this dense market report and pull out the key takeaways for everyone listening. We want to give a clear snapshot. How big is this market now? Where's it likely heading? Which parts of the world are leading? What's driving it all? Think of it as like your shortcut to understanding a pretty significant piece of medical tech and the business side of it.
An express route. I like that. And it's a global report, so we're getting the whole world view. Just to give us a sense of scale, what are the numbers looking like right now?
Okay, so the report estimates the global market for these devices will hit about USD 800 740 million in 2025.
$8.7 billion.
Yep. So even now, it's a pretty substantial sector.
Okay, USD 8.74 billion in 2025 definitely gets your attention, but the report suggests some pretty dramatic growth after that, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. The projections are, well, quite significant. The forecast is for the global market to reach, get this, USD 23,900.98884 million by 2033.
Wow, nearly $24 billion by 2033. So what's the main thing pushing this huge jump?
So the report highlights a compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, of 13.48% between 2025 and 2033.
13.4%. That's strong.
It is. And
Yeah.
a really big factor behind that is the rising number of people worldwide dealing with neurological disorders.
Oh, dear.
As populations age globally and we get better at diagnosing these things, we just see more cases.
Yeah.
And that naturally bumps up the need for effective treatments like neurostimulation.
That makes sense. Longer lives mean, unfortunately, more chance of these conditions cropping up. Okay, let's zoom in a bit. Different parts of the world. How does this market break down geographically?
Right, so the report gives a detailed regional look.
Right.
Starting with North America, it currently holds the biggest piece of the pie, over 40% of global revenue.
Over 40%. Wow.
Yeah. In 2025, that North American market is estimated at USD 233.80 million, and it's projected to grow at a CAGR of 11.8% through 2033.
Okay, so leading now, but maybe growing slightly slower than the global average you mentioned.
Exactly. Still strong growth,
Right.
but other regions are expected to catch up faster.
And within North America, I assume the U.S. is the main player?
Yes, absolutely. The U.S. is the clear front runner there. Market size of about USD 551.47 million in 2025, and a CAGR just slightly lower at 11.6%.
Okay.
Then you've got Canada, following with a market around USD 388 million, but a bit higher growth rate,
Yeah.
12.6%. And Mexico is around USD 294 million with a 12.3% CAGR.
So U.S. dominates, but Canada and Mexico are showing really healthy growth too. What makes North America the leader overall? What's the secret sauce there?
Well, it's a few things. North America has, very advanced medical tech, a really established healthcare system, and just significant demand for these kinds of innovative treatments.
Right.
Plus, supportive reimbursement policies often help, and you have a lot of the key companies based there. That plays a big role, too.
Makes sense. Okay, now let's hop across the Atlantic. How's Europe looking in this space?
Europe's holding the second largest share, over 30% of the global revenue.
Still very significant.
Definitely. Market size around USD 234.60 million in 2025. And Europe's expected to grow at a CAGR of 12.4% between 2025 and 2033.
12.4. And I imagine within Europe, it's probably a few key countries driving that.
Absolutely. The report breaks it down. The UK market is about USD 425 million with a strong CAGR of 13.2%. Germany's bigger, around USD 502 million, growing at 12.6%.
Okay.
Then France is around USD 233 million, 11.6% growth. Italy, about USD 218 million, 11.8%. Russia's quite large, actually, almost USD 393 million, growing at 11.4%. And Spain is around USD 208 million, 11.5% growth. So yeah, pretty varied picture across the continent.
A really diverse landscape in Europe then. UK and Germany leading in size, solid growth pretty much everywhere.
Right.
What are the main things driving growth in Europe specifically?
Well, similar to North America, that rising prevalence of neurological disorders is a major factor.
Right.
But Europe is also seeing really significant progress in minimally invasive treatment options.
Mm-hmm.
And that lines up perfectly with what neurostimulation offers.
Good point.
Plus, you generally have government support for medical innovation and pretty robust healthcare systems in many European countries. That helps too.
Okay, so North America and Europe are the current big players. What about the Asia-Pacific region? We hear so much about growth potential there across so many sectors.
You're absolutely right to ask. APAC holds a significant share, around 23% globally, market size about USD 2097.60 million in 2025.
Okay, nearly a quarter.
Exactly.
Right.
But here's the kicker. The projected CEGR for APAC between 2025 and 2033 is an impressive 16.3%.
16.3. Wow, that's significantly higher than the others.
It really is. It makes APAC the fastest growing major region by a pretty wide margin. So, while North America is the giant today, this explosive growth in APAC suggests we could see a shift in market dominance down the line.
Interesting. What's fueling that? Is it just aging populations or?
It's partly aging, yes, but also massive investments in healthcare infrastructure that we're seeing across the region. It's a combination.
Okay, so 16.3% overall for APAC. Where is that growth really concentrated? Are there specific hotspots?
Yeah, the report points out several high-growth markets. India really stands out, projected CGR of 18.2%.
18.2.
Yeah, with the 2025 market around USD 210 million. Southeast Asia as a whole is also strong, 17.1% CAGR, market size about USD 138 million.
Okay.
Then if you drill down further, Singapore's at 16.6%, Taiwan 16.1%, the rest of APAC grouping at 16.1%, Australia 15.6%, South Korea 15.4%, Japan 14.8%, and China, which actually has the biggest market within APAC right now.
Right, China's huge.
Yeah, about USD 881 million in 2025.
Yeah.
It's still showing really healthy growth at 15.8%.
That paints a really dynamic picture. So what's the main story behind this rapid APAC growth? Is it specific healthcare needs or maybe cultural factors speeding up adoption?
It seems to be several things coming together. Like everywhere else, yes, rising neurological disorders, aging populations, but in APAC, you add in increasing government and private healthcare spending.
The investment piece.
Exactly. Rapidly improving infrastructure, growing adoption of advanced tech, plus rising disposable incomes and just greater awareness of these therapies, both among doctors and the public, all feeding into this really impressive growth.
It definitely sounds like APAC is the one to watch very, very closely. Okay, let's move on. What about other parts of the world? South America, what's the story there?
South America accounts for just over 5% market share, size around USD 332 million in 2025. And the projected CAGR is 14.1% through 2033.
14.1, also strong growth.
Definitely. The key markets within South America are Brazil, about USD 142 million in 2025, growing at 14.7%, and Argentina, around USD 56 million, but with a slightly higher AGR of 15.0%.
So Brazil and Argentina leading the charge there. What's driving growth in South America? Similar factors.
Pretty much, yeah. Increasing investments in healthcare infrastructure is a big one, and also just rising awareness about what neurostimulation can do. As healthcare systems develop and access improves, you see more uptake.
Okay. And the Middle East?
Middle East has a smaller share, around 2%, estimated at about USD 350 million in 2025. But interestingly, it shows a strong C share of 14.8%.
14.8, also very healthy. Any specific countries?
Yeah, notable growth in Saudi Arabia market around USD 123 million, 15.1% CAGR, and the UAE about USD 72 million with a 15.3% CAGR.
Seems like the Middle East also has significant growth potential then. What's behind that surge?
It's largely fueled by increasing healthcare spending in the region. Governments are investing heavily. Plus, there's growing demand for non-invasive treatment options, which plays right into neurostimulation's strengths.
Okay, makes sense. And finally, Africa. What's the picture there?
Africa currently has the smallest share, around 1%. Market size about USD 192 million in 2025. The projected CAGR is 13.7%.
13.7, still double-digit growth.
Yes, South Africa is the largest market within the region, about USD 68 million, and growing a bit faster at 14.6% CAGR. The key driver there is really the ongoing development of healthcare infrastructure across the continent. As facilities improve, more advanced treatments become accessible.
It's really fascinating seeing those different growth speeds and market sizes across the globe, each with its own story. Okay, so the report also gets into specific types of devices within this market. You mentioned earlier, spinal cord stimulators are the fastest growing segment.
That's right. The report explicitly flags the spinal cord stimulator category as the fastest growing segment in the whole industry.
Why is that, do you think? What makes them stand out?
Well, it's likely because they have such a broad application for various kinds of chronic pain,
Hmm.
and chronic pain affects a massive number of people globally.
True, it's a huge issue.
Exactly. And as people increasingly look for non-drug, less invasive ways to manage pain long-term, spinal cord stimulation offers a really compelling alternative for many.
Spinal cord stimulators tackling such a widespread problem? Yeah, that definitely explains the fast growth. Okay, let's zoom back out a bit. What are the big overarching forces pushing this whole market forward? The key market drivers.
So the report highlights a few crucial ones. First, as we've touched on, just the increasing number of neurological disorder cases worldwide. More need creates more demand.
Right.
Second, major technological advances. These devices are getting smaller, many are now wireless. That makes them much more patient-friendly, easier to use, potentially more effective with better targeting.
That miniaturization and wireless aspect sounds key.
It really is. It's not just about size. It improves comfort, allows for more personalized therapy, maybe even remote monitoring and adjustments down the line. And finally, the high prevalence of chronic pain is a huge driver, offering an alternative to long-term meds or more invasive stuff.
So it's this powerful mix of growing need and better technology making these devices more practical and appealing. But it can't all be smooth sailing, right?
Hmm?
Are there challenges? What about market restraints?
The report does point out a couple of main restraints, yes. One big one is often the high cost, the devices themselves, plus the implantation procedures. Can limit access, especially in places with less developed healthcare funding.
Yeah, cost is always a factor with advanced med tech.
Definitely. And the second restraint is the stringent regulatory approval process.
Yeah.
Getting these devices approved in different countries can be complex, it takes time, and that can delay launches and slow down market expansion overall.
Those are important hurdles. Innovation needs to be accessible, and navigating regulations is tough.
Okay, looking forward then, what are the key trends shaping the future here?
Well, the report emphasizes a few key trends. Technology advancement will definitely keep driving things. Constant efforts to make devices even smaller, improve wireless connectivity for easier programming, better data, and increasing the precision of the treatment.
More sophisticated stimulation.
Exactly. Moving towards more personalized, more responsive therapies. And alongside that, there's just this rising demand generally for non-invasive solutions for neurological issues and chronic pain. Neurostimulation fits that bill really well compared to, say, major surgery. So the focus is on making treatments more effective, less invasive, easier for patients. Makes sense. Now, I imagine this market has some big corporate players. What does the report say about the competitive landscape?
It does indicate it's a highly competitive market, yeah. Several key players have significant shares.
Yeah.
Companies like Medtronic, Boston Scientific, Abbott, they're mentioned as major leaders.
The big names in med tech.
Right. And they're all heavily invested in R&D, innovation, strategic partnerships to kind of solidify their positions and expand what they offer.
And the report even gave a couple of really recent specific examples of new approvals, didn't it? That helps make the activity feel more real.
Exactly. That activity really shows up in recent news, like these approvals. In June 2024, Nexalin Technology got approval in Brazil from Anvisa for their second-gen 15 milliA Neurostim device. That's their third global clearance. So that's noteworthy.
Okay.
And just before that, January 2024, Abbott got FDA approval in the U.S. for its Liberta RC Rechargeable Deep Brain Stimulator, or DBS system.
GBS, that's the one for Parkinson's and similar conditions.
That's right, implanting electrodes deep in the brain to regulate activity. The Liberta RC is significant because, apparently, it's the smallest rechargeable implantable pulse generator out there, and it has the longest-lasting battery life for comparable DBS devices.
Smallest and longest lasting. That sounds like a win.
For sure, these examples really underline that constant innovation and the regulatory momentum that's happening.
Those are great concrete examples. Okay, the report also broke things down by like where the procedure happens and who the end user is, right? Let's start with the type segment. What was interesting there?
Right, so under type, the report talks about skin preparation.
Yeah.
Preoperative skin prep is really vital. Getting optimal electrode attachment, minimizing infection risk. It's critical for these treatments to work well, especially for the more invasive ones like DBS or spinal cord implants.
He's basic but crucial.
Absolutely. Proper cleaning, disinfecting beforehand. Essential to cut down complications. But what's interesting is the report identifies intraoperative skin prep, meaning during the surgery, as the fastest growing type segment.
During the surgery itself, that's maybe not the first thing you'd think of as fastest growing. Why is that?
Well, it seems to be driven by neurostimulation being integrated into more and more types of surgeries. As it becomes a more common part of operations for various neurological or pain conditions, maintaining that sterile field during the procedure becomes even more critical.
Ah, okay. More procedures means more focus on keeping things sterile throughout.
Exactly. Minimizing infection risk during the operation itself is paramount for good outcomes.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's switch to the end user segment. Where are these devices mostly being used now, and where's the fastest growth happening in terms of setting?
So currently, hospital operating rooms really dominate the market. That's largely because many of these procedures are still surgical, needing that specialized or environment and equipment.
Right, the implantation itself.
And hospitals have the advanced gear, the skilled staff to do these complex implantations, and the initial programming. However, the report points to hospital wards as the fastest growing end user segment.
Hospital wards, not the OR. Why is that shift happening?
It seems to be mainly driven by the rise in neurological conditions that need advanced, often ongoing treatment. These therapies are increasingly being used on the wards for managing chronic conditions effectively, often non-invasively. Things like Parkinson's, chronic pain, epilepsy, managing them within the hospital setting, but outside the OR.
So, using the tech for ongoing care, not just the initial implant.
Exactly. And advancements in the devices themselves, better outcomes, fewer side effects, easier management, are also helping push this trend. Using the tech beyond the operating room for longer-term care within the hospital.
So we're seeing these technologies becoming more integrated into overall patient management on the wards. That really highlights how their role is expanding.
Precisely. It signals, a broader acceptance, integrating these therapies more into the standard of care for a wider range of conditions.
Well, this has been a truly comprehensive deep dive into the global neurostimulation devices market. We've covered a lot of ground.
We certainly have.
From the overall size, those impressive growth numbers, the regional differences, the drivers, the challenges, the trends.
Absolutely. And just to hammer home the scale again, starting around USD 8.7 billion in 2025, projected to hit nearly USD 24 billion by 2033.
Yeah.
That really underscores the sheer potential and dynamism here.
It really does. It makes you think, with these kinds of growth trends, all this constant innovation, what kind of impact could neurostimulation devices ultimately have on the future of healthcare?
Mm-hmm.
And, more personally, on the lives of people actually living with these often debilitating neurological conditions or chronic pain?
That's the really crucial question behind all the numbers, isn't it?
Yeah.
Beyond the market figures, it pushes us to think about the bigger picture, how we treat these tough conditions, how we improve quality of life for millions.
Yeah.
It's definitely an exciting field, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it continues to develop.
Definitely something to keep thinking about. It's clear this market is way more than just numbers. It's a really vibrant, fast-moving field with, well, huge potential to impact people's health and well-being. Thanks so much for walking us through all this today.
My pleasure. It's a fascinating area to discuss.